we're moving towards a future of clean, renewable energy, towards a CO2 neutral society. And to enable this future, we need an abundance of green energy. But on the short term, we need hydrogen and a way to integrate hydrogen into our system. On the long term, we need electrochemical conversion to use renewable energy directly. Together with you, today, we will explore the steps that lay ahead of us and what we can expect from the near future. And we will take a look at the new discoveries and the progress we made last year. So thank you for joining us at already the 4th Dutch Conference on Electrochemical Conversion and Materials. And like last year, this one is also online, but probably the last online one, as we expect next year to meet again in person in The Hague. I'm Marloes ten Kate, I'm your host of today, and I stand here next to Professor Richard van de Sande. And Richard is the chair of the Advisory Committee for Electrochemical Conversion and Materials. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Marloes.
Hi. So can you introduce us quickly into the ECCM world?
Yes, the Advisory Committee, ECCM, was installed by the 3 top sectors, ECCM, and it actually deals with, of course, the enormous challenge which lies ahead of us.
Yeah.
Going towards a CO2 neutral infrastructure, energy infrastructure, but also a chemical industry, built environment, etc. And for that, actually, we have to switch from fossil fuels towards, let's say, green electricity. And with this green electricity, we have to basically think and rethink the whole production of chemicals, but also think about maybe synthetic fuels, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And for that, you need electrochemical conversion and probably also a lot of new materials and material solutions. And that's basically what the Advisory Committee does. It tries to actually stimulate this movement and bring advice on this, on what the route to take towards these climate goals of 2030 and 2050.
And what can we expect from the program today?
Now, today it's, of course, a very exciting program, I would say, and all the aspects of the Advisory Committee will actually be
present.
Will be present in the program, from let's say the science to the technology development, but also think about industrial integration. We have a whole let's say, parallel session on that. And also, I would say, for the first time this year, we actually have a lot of attention towards the power infrastructure.
Right.
Basically the source of where it all starts, the green electricity, and how we should do this also.
Right, yes. So a lot to look forward to.
Yes.
Very full program. So before we continue, we're very curious about you guys at home as well. And we would love to know, where are you right now? So in which country are you right now? So we're in the Netherlands here, but where are you? Are you in the Netherlands as well, or are you located at a different country? In order to answer this question, you can scroll down. So beneath this plenary session, you can see a question popping up. From which country are you joining us today? If you let us know, then we will make a wonderful word cloud out of all of your answers, and we will see from which countries you are all gathered here. Richard, which country do you think will pop out the most?
Now, yeah, I think the Netherlands, of course, will pop out the most.
It's a Dutch conference, right?
Yeah, but given the COVID situation, I expect also a lot of people are coming from the outside. But also we know that ECCM has a lot of interest also in our neighboring countries like Germany and Belgium. And also the US, probably all, let's say, fertilized by the previous conferences, where they know, okay, this is a very nice platform where the Netherlands is actually bringing parties together now at the moment. So I expect that it...
oh, you are spot on. The Netherlands, Germany, and let me see. Italia, France. Great. Oh, and Germany is really
Belgium.
big. I see Belgium.
Yes.
Yeah. So you were spot on this. Okay. So while we wait a little further for all your answers to appear, I have some really quick announcements to make. If you have any questions during this conference, you can put them in the chat. Also, if you have remarks, just put them in the chat. We have different ways of options to answer to you. So the first one is that we answer your question directly with the current speaker that we have in the studio. But we also have a chat moderator available, and he is also available for you to answer any questions that you have. If for what reason, for example, if time doesn't permit, we are not able to answer all of your questions, then we will make a frequently asked query area later on the website, and we will get back to those. So don't hesitate. Ask everything and make all remarks that you want in the chat, because if we don't address them right away, we will get back to you later on. Okay, that being said, I'm really curious to know what other countries popped up. Oh, South Africa has joined us.
Yes, South Africa.
Oh, that's nice.
It's interesting.
And let me see.
Yeah, many in the Netherlands in different spellings.
Yeah, the Netherlands in different spellings, right?
And
Yeah.
the usual suspect like Belgium, France, and Italy, I see.
And Italy.
And Germany.
Nice. So it's a really international crowd we have here amongst us. Great, nice. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you all here. Okay, so it is time now to actually introduce our first keynote speaker of today, and he's already with us here in the studio. Mark Hendriksen, welcome.
Thank
This
you,
is the
Marloes.
moment where you want to have an applause, right?
Yeah.
So
It's a full crowd here.
yeah, it's a small crowd here. Hopefully next year in The Hague.
Indeed.
So ECCM works closely with the three top sectors in the Netherlands, being chemistry, energy, and high-tech systems and materials. Now, every year we alternate with an opening lecture by one of these three top sectors who kicks off the conference. And for this year, we invited Mark Hendriksen, the chairman of the top sector, high-tech systems and materials. You have 35 years of experience in the technical industry, 2 decades in the automotive sector, and 15 years in the high-tech equipment industry, being the CEO of NTS Group until last August. Mark Hendriksen, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to be present here. Thank you, Richard, as well. And the talk today for me, or the first talk is called for me, High-Tech Meets Chemistry. And that's an important part, and I will explain to you in the presentation why this is an important part. First of all, if you ask any people in the Netherlands, but probably also in the countries we just saw popping up, what led to the golden age in the Netherlands? And probably 90% of the people will say to you, it's the trading capacity and competence of the Netherlands that led to the golden age. In fact, that is not the truth. The truth is, it is a person called Cornelis Corneliszoon who invented the crankshaft with which he turned a windmill into a sawing mill. And with that sawing mill, we were able to build boats much, much quicker than anybody in the world. Before that, it took 30 weeks with 2 persons to build a ship or to saw a tree, and now it took only 1 week. And with that, in 1670, so 70 years later, the Netherlands had more than 5,000 sawing mills in the country and the biggest fleet in the world. And that led to the golden age. And yes, of course, we did have good trading competences as well. But without this invention, which was a technical invention, we wouldn't have had the golden age as we are now still having profit from. So if we look to the high-tech sector of today, it's still a very important world-class sector. We're talking about 500,000 professionals in the Netherlands. We're talking about approximately 90,000 enterprises. And these are enterprises, very big companies, but also SMEs, startups, and scale-ups. And together, they have a production value of more than 160 million euros and an export value, a very important one, of more than 50 billion euros. And again, a very important one, the contribution from the private companies in public-private partnerships, innovation partnerships, it's more than 500 million per year. So it's an important sector, but concentrated on these high-tech machines. Now, what is the, I would say, the USP of the Dutch high-tech sector? It's the fact that we combine in-depth expertise in several fields, which all have to do with technology, with precision technology, like optomechatronics, thin film technology, plasma technology, cyber physical systems, lithography, and embedded software. But maybe the most important thing is that we are able to combine all these technologies into a system and try to get the optimum of the total system, the optimum performance of the total system. And we combine that with a world-class standard of production of precision components. And precision components are components that are made in a precision of micrometer level. So that is really very accurate. And then we produce machines or modules for machines, that are able to execute very accurate processes. And the combination of that makes the high-tech sector in the Netherlands of world-class standard, and in some fields even the world-class leader in the field. Now, if we look to the actual challenge that we have, and that Richard explained to us in the beginning, it's a huge challenge. If we have to reduce the CO2 to the levels that are agreed upon in 2030, we need to reduce 60% compared to 1990 within the industry sector. And the energy-intense sector in the Netherlands is a very important sector. It represents 20% of the Dutch economic revenues and added value. And that the Netherlands is, after Germany, the biggest hydrogen producer, 60.5 billion cubic meters. And this challenge cannot be achieved by continuing to do what we are doing. We need to join forces with all the expertise to cope with the challenge and to come up with solutions that are able to meet the goal of 2030 or even 2050 if we talk a bit further down the road. Now, what we have been doing, I will come back to this one. You see on the left-hand side of this sheet a program which is called Groen Vermogen, which is very difficult to translate. But anyway, this is one of the programs that we have asked for in the growth fund of the national government. This is a cooperation between the three top sectors, the same three top sectors that are represented here today. So the high-tech sector, the chemical sector and the energy sector. And in a later talk, Sandra de Keizer will go more into detail in this program. The same counts for this mapping on the high-tech on ECCM. Also here, in a later talk of Ton Pijnenburg, he will go into more detail about what aspects of the high-tech world are of an asset in this ECCM program. You see that has to do with the production of the electrochemical substitute or hydrogen in this case, or also in the integration in the total system. Again, here we have a challenge to organize the total system of making electricity, transporting electricity, adapting all the users, but also adapting production facilities. So you have to look to the total system and find the optimal in this system. Ton Pijnenburg will go into more detail in this later in the sheets. But the important factor is that we are talking about two worlds. We're talking about a chemical process world, and we're talking about a high-tech equipment world. And the languages differ, the cycles differ. If you go to the chemical world, these are long cycles. You can build a factory for 30, 40, 50 years. And you do a yearly checkup in the summer where you close down the factory, and it's slowly processing, but it's all about lasting. It's built to last. If you go to the high-tech sector, it is built to be quick. It's built to be quick in the market. You have to adapt quickly to the new challenges. And we do some engineering. You have an alpha series that go directly to the end customer. They try and work with it. You improve. Then you have the beta series. Then you have some updates, mostly also software updates. And 1 year later, you come up with a new machine. If you go to a chemical company, if you go to the plant, or if you go even to the headquarters, the things they talk about is safety, safety, safety. If you go to a high-tech company, they talk about speed, speed, speed. And the fact is that we need both. We need the safety and the long-term thinking of the chemistry industry, and we need the quickness of the solutions and adapting to changing situations, because we do not know exactly what the solution will be, and we need to change quickly what we try and adapt and then try again further. Now, if we do this, we have the ability to turn the challenge into an opportunity, because the Dutch energy-intensive industry is of world-class standards in performance and efficiency. It's absolutely top of the world. But the CO2 reduction, where we talked about, will not be achieved if we don't use disruptive technologies. If we continue to do what we did and just optimize it a little bit, we will not achieve the challenge. The Dutch high-tech industry is of world-class in these disruptive high-tech precision technologies. So we have two world-class sectors, and if we combine those two together, we will not be able to secure the energy-intensive industry in the Netherlands and achieve the reduction targets, but also to create an export opportunity for the high-tech sector, because all other countries have the same challenge. So from the high-tech sector, we have a second proposal for this growth fund in the Netherlands, which is called Next Gen High-Tech Project, where from a high-tech standpoint, we try and come up with solutions for example, electrolyzing, for making other way of electrolyzing, and especially with a huge cost down in this process. The same counts for plasma technology, where we have the same sort of program, and we are starting these programs now with the aim to start with a low TRL level and go very quickly to higher TRL levels by trying, adapting, trying again, adapting, to be able to be as quick as possible. Because let's be honest, 2030 is around the corner. So in my view, if we look to the actual situation, what we have to do is we had a pragmatic solution of Cornelis-Corneliszoon in the year 1600, which led to the golden age in the Netherlands. We need another pragmatic and way of cooperation to change the actual way of producing hydrogen or other electricity means, and be front runner again and leading to a next golden age. That is my introduction
in a nutshell,
in
yeah.
the ECCM conference.
Thank you very much, Mark. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and then we will ask them for you. So I have a question. So you talk about a collaboration between chemistry and the high-tech world. What do you think is the biggest challenge in this collaboration?
I think the biggest challenge is the fact that what I pointed out is the fact that we have two different languages and two different cycles. To be very honest, both of them are of world class and they don't know each other. Or at least now we are starting to get to know each other.
Right.
But we have to improve that, because if you talk each other's language, you understand each other's programs better.
Right.
And it has been like talking on two waves. And that is what we have to change. And if there is openness, which I do feel nowadays, then we are able to do so. But if we stay in each other's worlds and we don't combine, then that is because then we will not meet the challenge.
Yeah, and if I understood you correctly, we do need to get more into collaboration with each other.
Absolutely, and it has started, and like Richard says, the three top sectors have a very good cooperation together. But I think the companies need to meet, the high-tech companies need to meet the chemistry companies and the electricity companies. And we're doing so now, but still, in my view, on a too low level, it should be more intense, and we should speed up.
Yeah, and how do you recognize this?
Yeah, I recognize this fully. Yeah, so indeed, we have intensified since last year. We have intensified, let's say, bringing these different top sectors together. We had a workshop in November last year. Also, the Dutch-German cooperation is in that framework. But it is essential to do this even more. And I think the Growth Fund, which already was actually shown, that will provide an additional possibility to do this and to strengthen and to intensify this, because now, like Mark says, the languages and the cultures still have to come together, and they have to realize that they are in the same, let's say, Dutch boat to actually make sure that we're going to meet these challenges.
Yeah. Where's the top sector energy? So you've talked about chemistry and high tech, and how is top sector energy?
It's a cooperation of the three of them. So of course, the energy sector is a very important one, because they provide the energy nowadays, and we have let's say the wind on the sea, which comes on land, and then you have to transport the energy to somewhere. So it's the combination of the three. You can't see it separate ways. You have to combine all three elements.
Right, exactly. Yes. Okay. So we're going to keep a conversation flowing here. If you have any questions regarding the keynote of Mark, or if you have questions to Richard, then feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer these questions, or not to answer, but to ask these questions. I hear that we have already a question there, so I'm looking at the screen to see what the question is that we have from you. How do the proposals Groen Vermogen, as you've called it already, and Next Generation High Tech interact with each other?
I do hope that Sandra has a sheet in her presentation, because it's indeed, if you go to Groen Vermogen, it's more about scaling up the total system of producing hydrogen.
Right.
And if you go to the high-tech, next-gen high-tech, it's the equipment that you need for that.
Right.
So it's equipment for electrolyzing, or it's equipment for plasma technology.
Right.
And Groen Vermogen is about scaling up to producing 100 megawatts of hydrogen or more. And that's a huge challenge as such. But they are interlinked together. We know of them because we're combining the two in, let's say, in a governance. But it's the equipment versus the total scale-up of the hydrogen production.
Right. And okay, let me see. We have another question popping up. How comes that the two worlds, so high-tech and chemistry, have not met before in the Netherlands? Okay.
Yeah, that is indeed a good question.
Yeah.
I think probably because both of them are and have been too successful. So if you're successful in your field, if you're of world class,
you don't need anyone.
Yeah, your competition is outside the Netherlands. I mean, so you compete, you go abroad because you conquer the world.
Yeah.
So does the high-tech sector, but the client structure is totally different. So the high-tech sector talks to Apple, and the chemistry sector has a combination with oil industries, for example.
Yeah.
So it's different worlds, and both of them are competing on a world scale. So you go to the world and you don't meet your neighbor. That's in essence maybe what happens.
Yeah, yeah. But you do see progress now in the way that they meet each other?
Yes, absolutely.
But it's like really from the last few years then, if I
Yes, it's due to for example, also the ECCM project that we were able to combine the two.
Yeah, it was basically identified by the three top sectors. Hey, we have to do something here, and that was actually why the advisory committee was partly installed also to actually start working on this.
Exactly.
And indeed, there were some, of course, some nuclei where the high tech already was a little bit interacting with the chemistry industry. So think about the fuel cell, let's say, manufacturing. In the region surrounding Arnhem, but also you think the link with the, let's say, automotive, which is of course obvious from the high-tech side,
right?
But with fuel cell actually technology coming into automotive, it also got, let's say, the chemistry part. So there you saw some of these, and that's actually where we want to build on.
Right.
So this indeed, this interaction should be strengthened, intensified to actually grab the chances which lie ahead of us.
And how do you see the role of ECCM for that purpose in the next coming of years?
Facilitating, bringing advice, initiating together with the top sectors, let's say big funds like the Growth Fund, workshops, organizations, summer school, human capital, as we have seen in the Dutch newspapers today. The energy infrastructure is actually on a hold because there's just not enough technical persons who can actually improve or actually build the new energy infrastructure. Exactly. That's all part of the deal. So that's also coming back in the Growth Fund as a very important agenda point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we've talked a little bit about the Growth Fund already. Let's zoom out a little bit. What exactly is the National Growth Fund? Mark, can you elaborate on that?
Well, the government has decided last year to put aside 20 billion euros in a 5-year period for 3 topics, which is innovation is one topic, infrastructure is another topic, and then the human capital is a third topic.
Yes. Right.
And there is a committee of experienced and wise people who judge the proposals that you put forward, whether they fit in the let's say the transition, the societal challenges that we have to cope with, and increase the economic value for the Netherlands. So it is a growth fund, which means the economy has to grow because of the fact that we use this project to come to life. But it has to do with the transition that we are facing. So in that sense, both Groen Vermogen as Next Gen High Tech fit well in the description. Now, of course, it's the committee to judge whether projects
those were 2 proposals.
There are 2 proposals, and we expect somewhere during towards the end of the year that there will be a judgment phase, and then hopefully beginning of next year there will be an approval. Although part of the Groen Vermogen project is already approved, and Sandra will probably talk about that. And it's more the innovation part. So at least we can start with the innovation, but to really scale up, we have brought forward a second proposal.
Yeah, and do you have any ideas already, like what it is that you will be judged on with both of these projects?
Well, an element, in essence, these two elements. So is it really helping the growth of the economy? Is it helping with these societal challenges?
Right.
And then is it really a group of people where we believe in that they will make it through?
Right. Right, yeah. And you already stated it, Sandra de Keizer will talk us
Yes, he
through...
will come back to this.
Yeah, specifically about groen
Yeah.
vermogen later on this day,
Yeah.
like what the practical implications are and what it entails. Okay, so for now, let's zoom out a little bit. We already gone into the depths for a bit. Let's zoom out. So the long-term goal of ECCM is to have a world where we use renewable electricity to power our economy directly. Yet, at the same time, I also hear hydrogen. We need hydrogen for the short term. So we have like a short-term trajectory and a long-term trajectory. Can you talk me through?
Yes, yes. Basically, that's the way it is actually structured, the advice of the ECCM, and you could say that's also reflected in the growth fund.
Right.
Because I think already a very big CO2 reduction can be achieved if we, Mark already referred to it, we were one of the largest hydrogen producers next to Germany.
Exactly.
That produces a lot of CO2 because it is actually produced from natural gas in which CO2 is emitted.
Yeah.
So if we can replace this by green hydrogen, so produced from green electricity, using electrolyzers to make green hydrogen.
Yeah, so using water, right, instead of
water
natural
in that
gas.
sense, yeah, and you make hydrogen and oxygen,
Exactly.
and fuel, let's say, this industry. We have already a significant CO2 reduction, but on the way we also learn a lot on, let's say, this new industry. Yeah, so this is the electrochemical industry, you could say, where you use electricity, green electricity, to make hydrogen. But next to that is that we also want to do this more in a direct way. So using direct, let's say, electricity together with water and nitrogen to make ammonia, for instance. And that will be the goal, I would say, for the longer term. But again, a lot of equipment has to be made and new processes have to be developed and designed. And so there's a lot of work there.
And can't we just skip the hydrogen part? Why do we need the hydrogen part first?
Because that will give us, on the shorter term, also CO2 reduction.
Right.
And it is an important to replace, let's say, the natural gas production of hydrogen by green hydrogen. That's a very essential thing. But also, don't forget, we want to deploy a lot of green electricity to buffer this in times that we don't need this green electricity. You also need to have an industry which is capable of accommodating this green electricity and making hydrogen. So,
exactly, yeah.
So.
And Mark, when you look at those two trajectories, so the short term and the long term, how is that from an industry point of view?
Well, I think in essence, what we'll try to do is use the actual processes and try and come up with equipment which is cheaper to use it. But in the longer run, you have to think about totally different technologies. For example, can we come up with batteries on thin film technologies which have more power and can store more energy? Exactly. Because, like Richard says, we use hydrogen for a part to store the energy, which is when the sun shines and we don't use it, and in the night we do use it and the sun doesn't shine. So it's a buffer principle, but in essence it's ineffective. And can we come up with more effective solutions using plasma technology, using thin film technology for totally new types of batteries or energy storage, let's put it in a more broader sense, in a way that that is cheaper and we can store more and more effective. So we'd lose less energy in the storage and de-storage.
Yeah, exactly. So I see a question popping up. How can the shortage of electrical engineers to build the infrastructure, so the human capital you already talked about, Richard, be addressed by 2030? It takes 4 to 5 years to train an engineer. Yeah, so like the short term is a really short-term trajectory here. Who of you guys has an answer to this question?
Now, this is already a long, I think, I look at Mark, this is, of course, the call of the technical industry already for a long while, that we actually train too few people. And so there should be a lot of emphasis on this because, the future is, of course, within these jobs. And there's a big future, a bright future, well-paid jobs, high profile.
We need the people.
Yeah, we need the people. So to accommodate this is a challenge. I think this is almost as big a challenge as coming up with new technology.
Oh, it is. So is this something that worries you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I do hope is if you look to the technical education system,
Yeah.
a rather high percentage of people chooses in the end another sector to work in
Yeah.
for whatever reason. But there are at least many people trained as a technician, but working in other sectors. Let's hope that they see now that they can play a role in this very important transition.
Bring them back.
Yeah, but also I think for younger people, this is something to work for.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, I can understand in the past that people said, "I don't want to work in a factory," or "I don't want to work in production. That is not nice." There's still a wrong perception of working in technical industries. But this is something you can play a role in this huge and important transition.
Yeah.
So if you are educated as a technician and you are now in another sector, whatever, come back and play a role.
Yeah, because it's exciting.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
New, it's like, yeah.
You do
feel
something
the future.
which is necessary for society.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so we're going to the last but not least question in this interview, because we have a new agenda coming up in September, and you will elaborate a little bit about this later on this day. But just give us a short overview. What can we expect, and also like what's different when we look at the former agenda about 2017?
Yeah, now the important items of, let's say, the first advisory report, the agenda, was okay. Start with hydrogen as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Then also start developing the direct electrochemical conversion, so directly going from nitrogen and water to ammonia or these kind of processes, and work on the human capital agenda. I think what has been, what is different in the new is the strong emphasis also on, let's say, the high-tech industry, because I think it is more or less recognized that this is one of our earning capacities if we develop this and if we do this correctly. So there's a strong emphasis also now in the new agenda on building this new industry and making sure maybe we do not create our own, let's say, original equipment maker, but we certainly have a lot to supply in technologies and materials, etc., for that upcoming industry.
Yeah.
So that's actually the emphasis in the new report, and I will dwell a little bit more on that in, let's say, in an hour from here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, great. Yeah, at 2:30, on top of my head,
Right.
you and Sandra will talk more about groen vermogen NL and about the agenda amongst
Right.
other things. Okay, so we are going to leave it at this. Thank you very much, Richard van der Sande and Mark Hendriksen, to
Thank
join
you,
us
Marloes.
here.
Okay, thank you, Marloes.
And then we will go to our next keynote speaker of this day. And I see her already present, so we're going to change the scenery here for you. Come on up, Andrea Ramirez. Nice to have you here. Welcome. So our next keynote speaker, Andrea, is always looking for solutions to decarbonize the industrial sector with her research. She has co-authored over 100 publications. You are editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Greenhouse Gas Control, and you will share your story about the potential impact of hydrogen and green chemistry on achieving international and national climate goals. So a very warm welcome, Professor of Low Carbon Systems and Technologies at Delft University of Technology, Andrea Ramirez.
Perfect. Thank
The floor
you.
is yours.
Thank you. Let me see. So, this is not my presentation.
No, I do think so too. That's the one of Richard later on. But
let's
maybe we need
move
to click a little bit through.
This
There
is
we
it.
are.
Can I go one back? So, thank you, everyone, and thank you very much for having me. And it's a pity we cannot see each other. This is one of the meetings I'm really looking forward in the year. And now, well, you are at the other side. Luckily, I have you here.
Yeah.
But, okay,
At least
let's
you
see.
have one person to watch.
At least I have one person not there. But let's see. So I think Richard and Mark were speaking about this. You know, climate goals as driving the future economy is not only a challenge, it's a way of how are we looking at how do we move forward? What is our society in 2050, 2060? Where do we want to be? So I always look at the climate goals like that kind of target of how we can move and how can we change the way we produce and we use natural resources and we distribute them. because it's not only about producing energy or producing chemicals, but who is using them and how are we using them and what happens when we don't use them anymore. So circularity, negativity, neutrality. These are the new terms that you see a lot coming on and that it will influence a lot of the way we develop. Now, what I have picked up are actually a new report from the International Energy Agency called, the Roadmap for the Global Energy Sector, Net Zero by 2050. And if people in your houses haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Not because I think it's demodeling, and not because I agree with every individual assumption, but it's a very interesting report about the challenges, about what do we need to do, how the economy would look like. It's a modeling exercise, but I think a lot of the data, the assumptions, and the trends are very valid to be discussed, to be analyzed, maybe not to agree upon, but to at least reflect where are we going and what does it mean. What I do see now in the picture for 2020 is the point of departure of the model. And it's actually, today's society, you have retrofit rates which are below 1% globally. We have a lot of use of unabated coal, natural gas, and oil. And unabated means, we just send our emissions into the atmosphere. Only 5% of global cars are electric. There is solar PV. We really are increasing, but when you look at the total amount of electricity, well, it's relatively, minor, 10%. And what is very interesting about the report is from 2021, we will not have new unabated coal plants. From 2021, no new oil and gas fields will be approved and developed. That's a very strong statement for an agency that works actually in commitment between different countries. And a place where the Netherlands was already there a couple of years ago. So they are catching up with us. And what you are seeing is a large concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, worrying people. We have an increased demand on energy. We still have a large portion of the population worldwide with no access to electricity or through utilities, so we cannot forget about that. We have chemicals and materials that are increasing, and we are witnessing an increased penetration of renewable energy sources, which is posing problems with, how you match the demand and the supply. And then you have that question mark in the mark in the slide of what can we put there that actually look at all these problems and try to solve it. And what you see in the analysis is a lot of what we have been speaking today. This is how they will think 2050 will look like if all the trends and all the measures will have taken place. And we see hydrogen playing a big role, 520 megatons of low carbon hydrogen. Notice they say low carbon hydrogen because it's a mix from what we call green hydrogen, so hydrogen from electrolysis, wind and solar energy, and blue hydrogen, so hydrogen from fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage. You also see that almost 70% of the electricity generation come from wind, PV, so intermittent sources. 90% is renewable. The difference between the two is biomass, hydroelectric, for instance. You see 90% of the heavy industry production in low emissions. More than 85% of the buildings are zero carbon. So it's quite a big challenge where we are putting ourselves as a society. And what is most interesting, we have the pointer doesn't work here. So we have a zero. The idea is really zero net CO2 emissions. No, it's not that every sector is producing zero, but when you put everything together, including negative emissions, you will get this. Now, if you look at the report, there are many, many, many figures. I didn't want to put, too many, but I thought I'm going to pick up in 3 because there are a couple of messages that you can see there. If you start what is my left side up, figure 2.12, there is a lot of information, so don't go through all of them, but there's 2 things. Number 1, activity is increasing. So all the scenarios is recognizing that economy is still growing, that there is an increasing demand in chemicals and energy, which can increase and will increase the amount of CO2 emissions. So next to the first increase, the arrow going up, then you see an arrow going down. Those are all the measures that we need to take into account. And the second message I wanted to take from here is you don't see one measure. You don't see 2 measures. You see a whole package of measures. It's portfolio measures. So it's electrochemistry, is hydrogen, is bioenergy, is energy savings, is energy efficiency, is behavioral change, is carbon capture utilization and storage, among others. So we need to develop all of this. So it's not picking a winner. There is no such a thing as the winner, but we need all. And that's one of the challenges we have. What you see in the picture next to it, in 2.19, is actually the change in hydrogen through time. A rapid increase of hydrogen deployment. That is what is required. And you see that right now, if we look, so they expect that we will abate CO2 from natural gas using carbon capture and storage, but still gray blue hydrogen is 95% of the hydrogen mix. That towards 2050 will be only 38%. Some people think it should be 0%. So, well, we do recognize this is market driven. It's very unlikely that it's going to be 100% green. But if we manage to get this at global level, in less than 3 decades, I think we are really, really changing our economy. Now, what you see in the last picture is related to industry. And what is very interesting is the last, the color, the rainbow that we see at the end, that are technologies. What are the status of the technologies? What you see in gray are technologies that are mature today. How do we reach those decrease in 2050? With a lot of new technologies. That's what that figure tells you. A lot of technologies that are today in the lab, that are proof of the concept, lab, pilot, need to be deployed at the scale working soon if we are going to reach this. Now, at the university, we are working on several areas. So just to speak about chemicals, and this chemical that I select here is ethylene. Ethylene is the basic production of plastics, and plastic is one of the materials we are using the most. Mm-hmm. One of the materials we are complaining the most as well, but the production is increasing over the years. So if you were going to produce the raw material of plastics, ethylene, what you have here are all technologies that are there are at some level of development. This is not how we produce plastics today. So there is a lot of money invested in all of this, and you see 3 different sources of carbon. CO2, we can use the carbon from the CO2 molecule, biomass, and waste plastic. Let's recycle and maybe produce ethylene from recycling waste. Again, no one winner, most likely a combination of all 3. I think one of the main challenges industry has at the moment is that we came and you saw the investment periods. Mark showed the big picture, how do we take industry and we develop industry. Mm-hmm. And you come and say to industry, well, there are 20, 30, 40 different ways to produce ethylene. Choose one. and by the way, all of them come from different value chains, and all of them are at different technology levels, and all of them have different environmental and economic trade-offs. The way we select is a little bit ahead, the way the companies are really looking and developing methodologies, but this is a point of attention. What plays a role when and under which requirements? How do we actually can guide this? Because if you just show this picture, it can create kind of freeze movement of I just wait and see what is the winner. We don't have the time. 2050 in investment time is yesterday. It's 2 investment cycles, 3 investment cycles, the most. So we need to move ahead. And the second point I wanted to do is the discussion here, even though it's not about introducing a new technology. It's not, I need a new technology A, and the problem will be solved. What we are trying to do is to change systems, and systems are inherently complex. So it's about the technology, the value chain, the regulations, the people who apply it, the products it produce, the recycling of those products. So it's completely way of how do we approach our economy. That is actually what is behind all these new technologies and all these regulations. And that's very challenging because, and we see a little bit now with Corona, as soon as we can, we try to go back to normal. Mm-hmm. And we are trying to say, no, the normal should be different. And that goes against our nature of trying to be comfortable with what we know. Now, when we assess technologies, and then this part of the work my group also does at the university, we look at technology and we ask ourselves, what is the impact of this technology in the system in a future system, and what is the impact of the system in your technology, and try to get this a little bit inventorized so that people can actually develop technologies in a way that will be more suitable. What we notice with a lot of studies, especially studies that focus a lot only in one component of the technology, that they tend to forget or assume things about the rest of the technology, what we call free lunches. So if I'm developing an electrolyzer, I will assume that the electricity is green, and it's cheap, or even for free, and it's continuous, even though it's green and it's intermittent. But in my assumptions, in my study, I assume suddenly become continuous. Or I have CO2 that needs to be captured, cost energy, that needs to be transported, that has impurities, but I assume I have it at gate 99.9999% pure. Or I assume I produce a product, but I forget to take into account how is the downstream processing. That is changing. A lot of interaction is happening between people in the labs, engineers, people doing life cycle assessment, people doing techno-economic analysis to get the full picture. Here I'm just going to show an example of one design. This is not applicable for everything, but we were trying to understand, if we have, for instance, CO2 using electrochemistry through ethylene, and we want to run the whole plant, not the reactor, the whole plant intermittent to kind of follow out how is the electricity pattern produced by a windmill. Can we run it, or do we need to do adaptations into the model? And the model looks quite complex, but what you will notice is that one is more complex than the other. And what happened when we did the model and tried to run it intermittent, that we realized we needed to simplify. We needed to reduce the size. We couldn't gain as much integrating different parts and different components, because the more integrated you are, the less flexible. Mm-hmm. So in order to be more flexible, we needed to be a little bit less efficient. So you are having a trade-off between the efficiency of the process and how flexible it is. This is important because it does change your mass, your energy balance, your life cycle assessment, your CapEx, your economics. So it's not just assuming, and we run it intermittent. I think we are starting to understand this matters, and not only my university, but several universities in the Netherlands and abroad are trying to understand how to design new chemical processes that can accommodate flexibility. It's not just about turning the electricity on and off. We need to change the way, the size, maybe smaller plants instead of large-scale plants. But that influences, my transport network and my value chains. The other thing, and I think Mark named it a little bit, and people tend to forget, we are not going to do a Control-Alt-Delete operation of our whole industry. It's not like we are going to go tomorrow to the port of Rotterdam, hopefully, say Control-Alt-Delete, erase all the companies that are there, and suddenly put new ones. We are starting from an existing industry here, or in Houston, in Texas, in any country. It's an existing industry. There are assets that we would like to use. And the reality is, many of these petrochemical parts are highly integrated between companies. This is the port of Rotterdam. And this is just the interconnections in terms of energy. They are sharing today their waste gases, the hydrogen, the steam, the refinery gases, products. So when you change one technology there, it can have cascading effects because partner B and C and D and E were interconnected to myself. So we need to look at this, taking into account as well, what are those interconnections and how do we do this change in a way that actually take us in the way that we want to go. So to assess this at the university, we're developing a twin model of the port and really trying to mimic all the interactions to understand how and in which way we can increase flexibility and still have a low carbon, efficient, that produces a lot of jobs kind of port for the Netherlands. What we are arguing right now is you look at processes and we don't develop a technology. And when we speak about collaborations between different tech IDs, it's also collaborations between different academic fields, between different parts of science. So we take an electrolyzer that is at the top of the slide, and we do the assessment, how will it look like if we scale it out at industrial level? It's not 10 by 10 anymore, but it's really a high industry. And based on that, then we look, what is the supply chain? How is that electricity going to go here? Where is the CO2 coming from? How I'm going to convert it and upgrade it? Who is going to use it? How am I going to distribute the products? And then I take a look, am I actually decreasing emissions at the value chain? Or am I just shifting emissions from A to B? Because if we are just shifting emissions for climate change, that doesn't matter. We need to decrease net emissions. So life cycle assessment, socio-economic interactions are important. And this is my last slide. These are things that I have been thinking about. What do we need to do? And I just locate 4 of them. I think people, hopefully in the other side, can identify themselves in some part of this. So whether it is we need to decrease costs, we need to scale up use of advanced manufacturing. That's what Mark was speaking about, intensification, modularity. We also need to have better tools to assess these pathways, to assess which technology to develop further, the system demands, the life cycle assessment. We need to better understand decision making, social acceptability. How do we get regulations in place that take us in the way we want to go? And at the core of that, of course, is technology and science, the early integration of theory, simulations, and experiments. Because we don't have the time to do one step and then do the second and then do the third and then sit. We need to do a lot of things in parallel. Time is running, and we are committed to make this change. So now it's time to do it. And that was it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And so I hear you talking a lot about like the social constructs that hold us against this. Like, is that, in your opinion, a bigger challenge than the technical developments that are needed?
I think we have learned something from history, and I think everyone, I'm a chemical engineer, but every time you say you have the technology doesn't mean it's going to be implemented.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we can recycle plastics doesn't mean that we recycle
That
plastics.
we're doing it, right?
That we are doing it.
Exactly.
Of course, you need to be able to do it. So yes, we have the technology to recycle plastics.
Yeah.
But if people don't do it, if people don't take the plastics and sort them and take them, your technology is not going to change. Technologies are nothing without people that use them.
Yeah.
And people that use them use decisions when use them for one or another. And people don't optimize as you think they optimize.
Right.
We are not rational beings.
Yeah.
All the time. We take suboptimal, decisions every day for different reasons.
Yes.
So I think when we look at transforming a system, you need to depart from technology. You need to understand the technology. The technology has to be ready. And then you take a step at the side, say, is society ready for this technology?
Exactly.
Do we have the regulations? Do we have the will? Does people understand what it is? Are people committed to do the changes, the behavioral changes? And I think the technology is easy peasy.
The technology is easy, but the social construct, that's the whole different level. Yeah, yeah.
Moving millions and billions of people.
Exactly. And I see another question also from the audience popping in. Should the green electricity be produced entirely in the Netherlands, or do you think it makes sense to import green energy, or, if applicable, the green hydrogen? Oh, interesting question.
I think I don't think we have this space. I'm a foreigner, so the Netherlands is a very nice but small country.
Yeah.
And we have the sea, of course, but the sea has more than one use.
Right.
It's not like we are only, this is we don't know it. I think there's going to be a combination of imports and natural produced electricity, natural produced hydrogen. I think we are regionally in a very good position together with Germany and Belgium, the 2 ports, to actually be a hub of hydrogen.
Exactly.
So it is going to be an import of hydrogen. It's going to be a national production of hydrogen as well. So it's both. But I think it will be naive to think we have the industry we have, which is so big, so important. The people, the cars, heat, and we are only going to use, the hydrogen. We don't use only the electricity we produce. That's the reality. So it's going to be European and even international hydrogen going around.
Okay, yeah, clear. So we have time left. I see 1 minute left for the last question. What are the key conditions for hydrogen to play a role in the future energy system?
Well, I think what is very, very important, and we have in this case, is not the hydrogen, is is the hydrogen value chain.
Right.
So if I produce hydrogen, and my hydrogen is produced from coal, unabated coal, then let's use the coal. You know, this doesn't make sense.
Right.
The only reason to use hydrogen is it has to be low carbon hydrogen. It has to be. It has to be from sources that emit low amount of CO2. If that condition doesn't make sense, then the rest is not going to make sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we are going to do a lot of changes, transform our economy, and result with the same amount of CO2 emissions or more.
Yeah.
So looking at the whole value chain, making certain that we are using actually the green hydrogen we should use.
Yeah.
I think that is very, very challenging.
We have some big challenges ahead for
It's
us
a lot
as
of
humankind
challenges.
at this moment. Thank you very much for
Thank you
sharing
very
your
much.
story with us, Andrea Ramirez.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So we're going to the next part of our program, and this is up to you, which you are going to choose, because we have the option to choose between two parallel sessions. You can enter the room by your choice by scrolling down. So beneath this plenary session, if you scroll down, then you will see them both popping up. You can choose either room 1, which is about international infrastructure, or room 2, about industrial integration. In room one, we have experts from the gas and electricity sector who will guide you through the infrastructural changes in the coming years. Or you can go to room number 2, industrial integration, where experts from the process industry will share their experience with implementing ECCM and hydrogen technologies on a demo scale in their operations. And we will see each other again here in this plenary session at 2:30. So enjoy. And welcome back. So we discovered some technical difficulties, and we want to apologize for that in the parallel sessions 1 and 2 just now. We're going to fix this, and we're going to provide a solution for the upcoming parallel sessions 3 and 4 later on in this day, and I will inform you by that time what that solution will be. So things will be fixed. All the presentations, you can see them back at our website, so you don't need to miss out any information from the 2 parallel sessions. You can watch them back on their website. So we have a poll question for everyone, for you guys at home, and we're very curious about your thoughts about this. The question is, for how long is blue hydrogen based on carbon capture and storage, CCS, needed as an intermediate option? Is your answer, well, in my opinion, CCS is not needed at all. The investments should be used for accelerating green hydrogen. Or is your answer, well, I think, let's say, next 10 years. So after 2030, CCS can be phased out. Next 20 years, so then after 2040, CCS can be phased out. Next 30 years, so that means that CCS will not be needed after 2050. Or the last answer, CCS will always be needed as part of the solutions mix towards net zero. Now, again, as all the other questions as well, if you scroll a little bit down from the plenary session, then you can see the question pop up there, and you can select your answer. And we will see here already the results popping in. So, Richard, what do you notice?
I notice a lot of realism, I think.
A lot of realism.
Let me phrase it like that, because
Yeah.
I think also IPCC actually has written this down in the report, that CCS will probably be needed. When it will be phased out, when we have the green solutions, remains to be seen.
Right.
Hopefully this is after 2030.
2030.
But I expect more that it will be after 2050.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's my expectation.
That's your own expectation. Yeah. Let's see, the audience has voted now, the majority, so that's 42%. CCS will always be needed. And so you are then a little bit more optimistic then, right? Like after 2050.
Optimistic in the sense that I think, of course, if we can do it by means of green electricity,
yeah,
and can make all our, let's say, electricity in that way, we don't need any of the feedstock, which are scarce, of course,
right.
Because you need to actually fire power plants. You need fossil fuels if you do this with CCS. Yeah.
Yeah, clear. Okay, so 47% at this moment says CCS will always be needed as part of the solutions mix towards net zero. And at this moment, let me see which one is the other runner-up. Oh, 50% even. And the other answers are a little bit even, between 17 and 20%. It is moving still a little bit here and there, but yeah, the majority obviously says CCS will always be needed as part of the solutions mix. Okay, so it's time for the next part in our program. Richard, you are going to share with us about the new agenda that is expected next September. You have also some other highlights to share, and then afterwards we will listen to Sandra de Keizer. You are secretary at the top sector energy, secretary of the advisory committee for electrochemical conversion and materials, and co-organizer of Groen Vermogen NL. We have already talked a little bit about that, but you are going to dive into more details together with us. But first, Richard.
Yes. Let me discuss a little bit of the activities and achievements of the ECCM advisory committee. So what we took up was, we're still busy with it, and it will actually be presented in September, is an update of the ECCM agenda. As you probably all know, in 2017, we had the first report, was presented to the top sectors and to the two Secretary Generals of the Ministry of Economic Affairs. But of course, in the meantime, the landscape has changed. The Dutch climate agreement was there, and of course, there's a lot of activity also in Europe. For instance, the European Green Deal. But apart from that, you see a lot of initiatives. Look in the media, you will see this. So there's an extreme need actually for coordination and a national vision on how actually to go into this transition in which we have to decarbonize, let's say, the industry, and where ECCM technologies actually play a large role. So there's a need for an updated agenda, and you see a small scheme. I will not dwell too much in that, but it's basically you see 4 lines, 4 arrows. The one which go vertical, they have to do with indeed the deployment of green energy, of green hydrogen, as soon as possible. Start with that. That's basically similar as in the 2017 report. The blue line is also similar. That's this development of direct electrochemistry from molecules with electricity directly going to the products, so not with the intermediate step of hydrogen. But importantly also are the arrows which are actually crossing these 2 arrows. They have to do with this building up this new industry, the manufacturing industry, which is a large opportunity for the Netherlands to have an earning capacity also to make money, let's say, with these developments. And the development of human capital. That's the pink arrow here in this case. And with that, I think within the next, let's say, 30 years, this is more or less the agenda we propose, and that will be presented again to the Secretary Generals of the Ministry. If you can go to the next slide. Yes, another initiative which we set up in the past year was basically accumulated in a call to action for the cooperation between Germany and the Netherlands. As you can see here, they have a lot in common. In October, there was a workshop with about 100 attendants, very interactive, unfortunately not live, but I think a lot came out of that, and eventually the results you see here, that was the call to action, and in the, let's say, the call to action in the ECCM field. And let's say in relation to that, there was, let's say, a call for proposals. There's now a small call, which is about 3 million large, is actually just closed.
Right.
And let's say a lot of projects were actually proposed between Germany and the Netherlands. But we're looking forward also to a bigger call where the ministries from Germany and the Netherlands actually work together, also around the theme of ECCM. And that will be that will have a value of about 10 million. And again, it's to stimulate these collaborations between Germany and the Netherlands within the theme of electrochemical conversion and materials.
Right.
If you could go to the next slide, Sandra. In December last year, that's another activity, we had a roundtable on hydrogen and green chemistry. And this roundtable was actually, it was a high-level table with the CEOs and the CTOs from big, let's say, companies out of the 3 sectors, energy, chemistry, and the high-tech world, together with the knowledge institutes, TNO, and with representatives of the, let's say, Dutch governments. The roundtable was organized by the 2 Secretary Generals of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and it was basically centered around how do we translate the goals of the Dutch climate agreement in concrete milestones and actions. Mm-hmm. And that was basically the outcome of this first roundtable. And now this week, just 2 days ago, we had basically a follow-up of that high-level roundtable in which we presented the action agenda, which you can see here, on hydrogen and green chemistry. Again, along these lines, which we actually also more or less have in our agenda of the ECCM. And it's actually identifying the path from the SWOT. There's a strength and weakness analysis within this action agenda, to milestones to get and to reach societal impact and also economical impact. The idea is also to come together with this high-level roundtable every year 2 times, mm-hmm. and to be basically an advisory board for the recently granted Groen Vermogen growth proposal. Yep. So advice here and let's say we'll actually go towards that Groen Vermogen proposal. And I think that's one of the big successes of the also the ECCM where they were actually involved. And Sandra will actually present it a little bit in more detail. Sandra, for you the floor.
Yes, thank you. So I don't have to convince you of the great potential of hydrogen and sustainably generated electrons. But what we do need in order to reach this potential are the smartest solutions, decisive cooperation, and an integral systems approach. Also, what we need, and we heard this afternoon, are well-trained people, skilled people that make this transition possible. And that is what Groen Vermogen NL is all about. So to scale up and innovate, to rebuild and construct, and to reskill and educate. And today I'm going to tell you more on where we stand with Groen Vermogen NL, or in English, Green Power of the Dutch Economy. But first, let me take you back a year and a half ago. So the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate worked with 2 proposals, one for hydrogen and one for green chemistry. Now, to submit this to the National Growth Fund. Now, the top sectors, chemistry, energy, and high-tech systems, saw the need and the opportunity to join forces and work together with knowledge institutions, industry, and government. So they asked a team of representatives to write a national integral plan, and this resulted in Groen Vermogen NL. So the main objective of Groen Vermogen NL is a strong national innovation ecosystem. This ecosystem is already partly in place, of course, with knowledge institutions, industry, from the chemistry, the energy, and the manufacturing sectors. But the challenge now is to make better use of the knowledge and expertise that is already there by connecting these industries and knowledge institutions from these different sectors and have them work together on a common goal within a programmatic approach. So, in order to get to this ecosystem, we did an impulse on 3 different elements. So first, we need rapid and substantial scale-up of hydrogen projects in the Netherlands in terms of production, storage, transport, and the applications. Also, what we need to do are supporting the initiatives that are already in place. And we need to make sure that the next steps in scaling up for hydrogen production and applications can start as soon as possible. Because these steps are important for the gigawatt scale we need in 2027, 2030 in order to reach these ambitions of the Netherlands and Europe. Now, second, we need coordinated efforts to research and innovation to facilitate this scaling up and, where possible, accelerating the scaling up of hydrogen production and application. Now, this R&D program will provide knowledge in the short term on hydrogen production and applications, and in the long term will provide knowledge on hydrogen and green electrons as raw materials and fuels. So this R&D program should contribute to solving technical issues and accelerating the necessary cost reduction, and also to develop innovative business models, because these are necessary. Now, the third element is that we need a national approach to strengthen this human capital. So here you see, so we translated these main objectives into operational goals. And here you see on the slide the integrated approach of Groen Vermogen NL. So on the left, you see the investment proposition. And we propose a tender or tenders for embedding the first hydrogen projects. Also, a tender for 3 times 100 megawatt green hydrogen production capacity with FID before 2023. And a tender or tenders for large-scale green hydrogen applications. Now, close to this investment proposition, we have the R&D program, or better, intertwined the R&D program. Now, the R&D program consists of 7 program lines that focuses on application-oriented and fundamental research on the production, the storage, the transport, and the application of hydrogen and green electrons in the industry and other sectors. And additionally, we're going to look at the socio-economic and the legal aspects of hydrogen. Then we have a human capital agenda, and here we want to realize a national platform for exchange of knowledge and training positions. We want to invest in the regional learning communities where people from education, research, public and private organizations work together. And we want to develop educational programs. So this is what we applied for, and the government confirmed its trust or confidence in Groen Vermogen NL by granting 338 million euros. So with these funds, we can take important steps in the next years in the R&D program, the human capital agenda, and the small-scale pilots and demo projects. Of course, the upscaling, so the large-scale projects and investments remain of the utmost importance and urgency, and that is why the joint top sectors applied for the upscaling part of Groen Vermogen NL in the second round of the National Growth Fund. So what does this 338 million mean for Groen Vermogen NL? I will go a little bit more in more detail. So we have a conditional allocation of 73 million euro, with 30 million for small-scale pilots, 35 for research, and 5 for the human capital agenda. This is for the first 2 years of the program. It's conditional, so it means we have to provide more justification, for example, on how these different program elements contribute to the earning potential. Also on the international position, KPIs, and how the human capital agenda will tackle the anticipated shortage on the labor and training market. Now, then we have a reservation of 265 million euros, and this is a reservation that will become available to the program after an evaluation in the second year, where, of course, we have to show progress on realizing the milestones of Groen Vermogen NL. And what now? what are the next steps? Where are we actually in building this program? So all the attention of Groen Vermogen NL is on answering the questions and conditions of the Growth Fund Committee in order to receive these allocated funds and start the program. We will do this next month, and we're confident that we can answer the questions. So then, in short term, we have to set up the governance and the funding schemes. So Groen Vermogen NL stated that all relevant parties should be able to participate in Groen Vermogen NL. This means that funding should go through transparent processes via organizations that are equipped to do so, like NWO and RVO. And at this moment, Ministry of Economic Affairs are working out the most simple but effective means of funding. And then, last but certainly not least, we're working on this second proposal to also get the upscaling of Groen Vermogen NL funded. Now, this is what I can tell you today, but we will give you more information as soon as possible. And we will do this through the website www.groenvermogennl.org, which will be launched very soon. And for now, you can find more information on the top sector websites, including a Q&A. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Richard, for keeping us updated. And yeah, we will move along for the next keynote speaker right away. So our next keynote speaker is digitally with us. He will share the story of state-of-the-art scientific advancements in electrochemical conversion and materials. Although he graduated in the Netherlands, he is now professor and head of chemical and biomolecular engineering at the University of Illinois in the United States. He is an expert in designing microchemical systems to study applications in energy conversion and chemical synthesis. So please welcome digitally joining us, all the way from the US, Professor Paul Canis.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this symposium.
Okay.
We're waiting for sound. I'm not hearing the sound right now. Okay, so I hear that it's good. Yeah,
can you hear me now?
Continue, Paul.
All right, so I'm going to talk about electrochemical manufacturing.
Yeah.
Can you show me the slide on the Zoom, please? Thank you. So electrochemical manufacturing really pertains the full scope of going from a system, an electrolyzer, to electrodes and catalysts. And there's many aspects of this. Of course, we're here to look at CO2 and climate and all the aspects. I like these two view graphs because they show to a lay public the seriousness of the CO2 concentration increasing over time, as well as the associated large temperature changes as a function of time. And this is the problem, of course, we seek to address. We need to produce less CO2 and or recycle CO2. So when it comes to renewable energy and using renewable energy and trying to reduce the CO2 emissions, this is the kind of pictures that you typically see. The excess renewable energy or renewable energy in general is used to drive electrified processes for hydrogen generation, for conversion of CO2 to all kinds of feedstocks, which I will focus on here, as well as on hopefully one day convert nitrogen also in ammonia, which of course is a big part of the fertilizer industry. So to achieve that, we are going to use the grid, and of course the grid still contains non-renewable energy. That will go up to 40 or 50% over the next several years, but that has to be taken into account when looking at the carbon balance of any type of electrochemical manufacturing process. So what we're trying to do is to replace parts of the current industrial production methods for all kinds of carbon chemicals. They're fossil fuel based and typically CO2 positive. To produce the chemicals that you see here in the middle, anywhere from formic acid, CO, methanol, methane, ethylene, and ethanol. And the question is whether we can electrify those processes and thus go away from the high temperature, high pressure type processes that require an enormous amount of energy input and thus also produce CO2. So electrifying carbon dioxide conversion really does two things. One, it uses CO2 as the feedstock and thus reduces emissions there. But two, you're changing the process from being heavily carbon positive to hopefully CO2 neutral or even CO2 negative. So the question is this possible? Research over the last several years has already shown that several of these compounds can be produced in an economically feasible fashion and also in a carbon neutral fashion, although there's still major questions regarding scaling. So here's just one example of a catalyst that we helped develop with the Gewerth and the Zimmerman group. In this case, we have polymers and copper sulfate that we co-electrodeposit to create a copper catalyst on an electrode. And we use it to convert CO2, in this case, to CO and also to ethylene. I'm showing the ethylene example. And we can achieve ethylene selectivities as high as 87%. So that's really good. But even more important is to achieving high energy efficiencies at the same time. In this case, about 50%. And that really helps to achieve a process that can be carbon neutral. So rather than list many examples, I created a table here that kind of lists the various products that are very often made from CO2 via electrocatalysis, the different catalysts used, and as well as the selectivities, activities, energy efficiencies that are achieved. And for economic viability, you need to be on the order of hundreds of milliamps per square centimeter. You need to have selectivities that are quite high. More than 90% would be ideal, but especially energy efficiency is key. And that's one of the hardest ones to achieve. And the key thing is that all four have to be achieved simultaneously. So sometimes you hear people talking about really high, activities, high current densities, but then that's at very low energy efficiency. So that's not a very useful number. The field still hasn't come up with a way of standardizing how we report performance to compare different systems and catalysts side by side. So good CO2 catalysts are available now for most of these products, except for methanol. I've seen some better results recently than the 2 to 5%, but that's still a big challenge. And of course, methanol is a major intermediate in the chemical industry. So if we can electrify that process, that would be really helpful in making the chemical industry more sustainable. So all of this work, of course, needs to be guided by techno-economic and life cycle analysis. A lot of that is happening around the world. And the challenge there is the lack of information on operation cost and capital cost of these type of electrolyzers, which for these processes is not well known, whereas for hydrogen evolution, water electrolysis, these numbers start to actually be known. So here's an example of life cycle analysis of CO2 emissions. As I mentioned earlier, the grid has a certain amount of renewable in it. So there is still a carbon CO2 tax that you need to apply there. CO2 capture takes some energy, so there is a CO2 tax there. The electrolysis process in the middle in green is, of course, CO2 negative. And then product separation can also be a major source, a major sink for energy that produces CO2. So these CO2 balances, you need to perform an every electrolysis process you do. And that is now can now be done in fairly straightforward ways to get a first idea whether any type of electrocatalysis process has a chance of being carbon neutral. So in optimizing these processes, there's a number of things that are important. The electrochemical processes, the electrolyte is often very, very important. This slide shows how you can intensify the process through electrolyte engineering, that is using different cations and anions and so on. And for example, different cations, large cations like cesium, they shield negative charge better. Higher concentrations of electrolytes, they help with conductivity as well as charge resistances. And pH, high pH helps in ways. It reduces the overpotential and thus you get higher activity. But there is also a side problem in that high pH leads to a reaction with CO2 to form carbonates that can deposit on the electrode and thus reduce the lifetime of the electrode. If you put it all together, all this electrolyte engineering approaches with different electrolytes, and you can actually get now to close to 1 amp per square centimeter current density, which is definitely in the realm of where you can start building economically viable systems, provided, of course, that the electrodes and the catalyst are stable over time. There's also a big development going on in terms of electrolysis cell configurations and going towards scaling. Catalysts are often tested in standard electrochemical cells, and then the next step would be an electrolyte flow cell design as shown here at the top. There you have a flowing electrolyte and you just apply the catalyst to one of the electrodes and you test what they do. And that's really nice, but for a scalable a system that you scale, that's going to be much more of a challenge because you need to circulate liquid electrolyte. It may degrade over time, and there's a lot of energy involved in the cycling of the electrolyte and so on. So just like with fuel cells, the desire is to go to membrane-based systems where the liquid electrolyte is replaced with a membrane, such as shown here, an anion exchange membrane in the bottom left. It's easier to stack. We know a lot about how to stack these things from the fuel cell community. And there's also fewer issues with separation of products because liquid products do not land in your liquid electrolyte, which is the case in the top design. So lots of developments are happening there, both in the exploring new cell design, new membranes, and also stacks. But there's also a reality check here. If you just think of CO2 alone, and that is that the economics and the scale are not that large. The scale in particular is only a few percentage of the total global energy emissions that the world produces. We need to mitigate about 15 gigatons per year. And the main products of ethylene, ethanol, methanol, acetic acid only represent 0.4 gigatons of 3% of that. Now, that can grow over time if we start to wean ourselves off fossil fuels a little bit. But still, many other approaches are necessary, not just CO2 reduction. Many approaches such as planting trees again and more renewable energy in the grid and so on. So this kind of is a summary of where things are. Further catalyst development is definitely necessary for increased stability, reducing loading, here and there improving selectivity, but major progress has been made there. Electrode durability is also a very active area. Again, we learn a lot from other electrochemical systems, and one of the key needs is to develop a standardized accelerated durability test protocol so results can be compared over time. I already discussed process intensification via electrolyte engineering. There's other approaches you can take. You can improve the cell performance by about 8% by putting a magnet on the anode side. You can use higher pressure and temperature, and there's opportunities for cell configurations and scaling. So the last part that I want to talk about is, when we talk about electrifying chemical manufacturing, it's really finding places where we can put some of these electrochemical conversions in existing plants. It would be great if we could start from scratch and develop a new plant, but in reality, this will be a gradual process. And for example, are we still going to do steam reforming in the way we do it now? So we get CO and then go from use CO reduction, not CO2 reduction, to get to desired products such as ethylene. Last part I want to talk about is co-electrolysis or co-conversion. So CO2 conversion alone is nice, but the problem is that on the anode side, 90% of your energy is roughly consumed. And that's because the anode, the Gibbs-free energy is so much higher than the Gibbs-free energy on the cathode side. So often we're looking at, in this bottom picture, at optimizing the overpotential to get better and better catalyst, but it's actually the part in green, the standard cell potential, that takes all your energy away because that's where the oxygen evolution has a major contribution. So the goal is that to bring this black barrier down, so to have less overall energy consumption. And that can be done by running your CO2 reduction on the cathode paired with a different reaction on the anode. And that's a development that's now starting to take foot in research and looked at seriously. So I'm using one example from our own research here, where we pair CO2 reduction with glycerol oxidation. And glycerol is a major waste of the biofuel industry. And in this case, we form a mixture of formate and lactate, but we didn't worry about purifying it. Just the fact that you have an organic oxidation on the anode means that the energy that you need for the cell is much lower. It's about a 40 to 50% reduction in overall energy requirement. And the simple reason is that your cell potential came down by switching from oxygen evolution on the anode to the oxidation of glycerol. So this, of course, has the potential to produce value-added chemicals on both electrodes. So there is additional economic value there. You save energy and you are able to produce chemicals on both sides. So I showed you one example here with for CO production. The same works for ethylene, ethanol, and formate production as well. So in the big picture, it looks something like this, where you have your feedstocks of CO2, nitrogen, water, biomass, and so on. And you drive that through an electrolysis process in the middle, where you have a cathode process and an anode process coupled, and you develop different products, which could be liquid fuels or chemicals or intermediates. So and that's where the big potential is for this field. CO2 reduction alone may work here and there by itself, but I think there is a much bigger prospect for co-electrolysis or co-conversion by running it in tandem and doing two desired processes at the same time. I'm talking a lot about CO2 reduction, but the more feasible scenario might be hydrogen evolution on the cathode in parallel with oxidation of organics on the anode, as I showed to the right. The other point to be made is that for this to work, there's a lot of other technologies such as CO2 capture, energy storage, biomass capture, product separations. All of that has to be integrated in the plant. And that's what also makes it complex, because electrolysis in itself is already a new technology, relatively new technology. The product separations are also different from what the industry is used to right now. And the feed, especially biomass, the feed might not be always the same when coming in. So there's all kinds of new challenges that need to be addressed before this vision can be realized. So these are definitely new paradigms in industry and society. And so this is my last slide. So CO2 reduction is becoming economically feasible for a number of products. Yes, there is hurdles in terms of durability and stack design and so on, but that's coming along. The big opportunity here is to start looking at doing good, desirable chemistries on both sides. So co-conversion, which not only reduces the energy you need to drive the process, but also can allows you to produce economic value on both electrodes. let me stop here and thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I'm also very curious if we have any questions, and if you do, then put them in the chat, and I'm more than happy to ask them for you. So you ended the story with co-conversion. Is that also the development that makes you the most excited of all of these technologies?
Yes, and definitely that's the biggest opportunity, but it's also the most complex opportunity. The range of feeds you can use is very broad. It's not just CO2 or CO or water. Any organic can be oxidized, but the challenge is that catalysts immobilized on electrodes are not very well developed for these oxidation processes. So selective conversion of glycerol to one product is still a challenge. You can get 6 or 7 different oxidation products. How to generate the one that you really want, right? So it's a tremendous opportunity, but also still a challenge for science to address.
Yeah.
And maybe the approach is to look at homogeneous catalysts. They are very good at performing selective transformations. Can we take homogeneous catalysts and immobilize them on the surface, and in that way achieve the selectivity we want in these paired co-conversion processes?
Okay, thank you. So let me look if we have any questions for you in the chat. I don't see them popping up right now. Yeah. Okay, so here we have a question. Can co-conversion be employed to broaden the scope of chemical conversion routes in electrolysis?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the whole point. Another interesting question is, what reactions do you pair? And does it always have to be the same set of reactions? Or depending on your needs or the feedstocks that you have, for a while you run hydrogen evolution on one electrode and glycerol oxidation on the other electrode, but then you switch to HMF oxidation, which is not a biomass adduct. So can you keep running the system, but changing the feed over time to run different processes at will at the anode and the cathode?
Thank you. And we have another question also popping up. What is the current status of catalyst/electrode stability with respect to carbon deposition?
Yes, and that's a good point. In the flow electrolyzers, we know a lot about the carbonates and other salts depositing on the electrodes. But those systems are not really suitable for scaling. The bigger question is what's going to happen when you start in these membrane systems and expose CO2 to a catalyst, and you have an anion exchange membrane which has hydroxide in it, whether you're going to clog your pores. So there's all kinds of strategies that have been developed to reduce deposits of carbonates on electrodes for flow electrolyzers, but for the membrane-based systems that is still not developed. And it's somewhat known of a problem in the fuel cell community, but that's just the CO2, the low CO2 concentration out of the air. And here, of course, we're going to use really high CO2 concentrations. So.
Yeah. I see a third question also popping up. So how easy or how difficult is it to match the current densities on the anode and cathode?
Yes, and there might be different approaches. In one, different areas of electrodes could be used. You could even have a system that is cylindrical, where the outside electrode is much larger than the inside electrode to match the two processes. But that is important. Can you match processes that are a factor 2 off in an activity? Probably yes, but factor of 5, that would be hard. So.
Yeah. Thank you for this answer. We also have a question to the audience, and I'm also curious about your thoughts about this, Paul. So the question that we have to the audience is, do we have to align the Dutch clean hydrogen cost target with the US Department of Energy target, which is going from $1 per kilogram in 2050 to $1 per kilogram in 2030. So The story behind this is that just recently, and June 7, that is, the US Department of Energy stated that they had a very ambitious target to slash the cost of clean hydrogen by just 80% in just 1 decade. Now, here in the Netherlands, we also have ambitious goals. However, our goal was to bring down the cost of clean hydrogen around 2050. So should we align and also hit for 2030? So the 3 answers are yes, it's good to have ambition, let's do this. Or no, not achievable, let's not focus on that. Or, well, maybe, depends on regional characteristics. So I see that 71% of you say, yes, it's good to have ambition. And a lower percentage at this moment, 7%, says no, that's not achievable. And then we have maybe, it depends on the regional characteristics in between. What are your thoughts about this, Paul?
So it's a typical approach of the Department of Energy in the US to set a cost target and set it really ambitious. And in that way, people analyze where can we cut costs and are very aggressive in looking at opportunities to do things drastically different. So to induce step changes in research, right?
Right.
And for hydrogen, yes, that is going to be helpful to drive that, because hydrogen, and regardless what approach you use, is going to be critical. But a parallel question, if you start thinking of these other products that I'm talking about, you know, CO2 reduction, for example, or of some of the biomass conversions, you know, what are the cost targets there? What should be the cost? Right? And for many of these, you know, the cost is unclear because there's intermediates in chemical industry. Right?
Right.
So better partnership or better information exchange between industry and academia of how much better certain electrolysis processes have to be to start to approach economic feasibility is important. And setting targets like this, in this case for hydrogen, is really helpful for that.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much, Paul Keynes, for sharing your story and answering these questions and your thoughts about this topic all the way from the US. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
So we will move to the next part of our program. Now, we already talked about green hydrogen technology, but what are the challenges in the industrial implementation of green hydrogen technology right now? And also, what are the opportunities? Next to me, Michael Sluik, welcome. Glad to have you here, our next keynote speaker of this day. You will show us an answer to both of these questions. You are a managing director of fertilizing factory Yara Sluiskil. That is the largest production site of the Norwegian company Yara International. Yara Sluiskil produces nitrogen fertilizers, industrial chemicals, and various other products such as dry ice to store vaccines, I've noted.
Yeah, well, yes, we did.
Yeah, amongst many other things. And Yara's mission is simple yet ambitious, which is to responsibly feed the world and protect the planet. So, Michael Sluik, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Well, first of all, many thanks for getting the opportunity to talk about a topic which is very close to my heart, because looking at the history of our company, it is in our DNA to further develop, and the energy transition is one of the big game changers in the industry in the coming years. And yeah, there are risks, there are challenges, but there are great opportunities as well. And if we get it right, this will be the base for the industry for the coming 50, 60, 100 years. So let me first give you a bit of an impression about what we as Yara do. This is a site you see which is 90 years plus old. And during that time, we have started off using coke gas to make nitrogen fertilizer. And we have converted in 66 to natural gas. And we will now have to transition to green hydrogen. But how is that possible? For us, and I use this case, we have always looked after the molecule nitrogen, because the value that we create is based on nitrogen compounds, and we use hydrogen to fix the nitrogen to make ammonia out of it and the fertilizer. The interesting thing is that we see now a second value stream coming up, and that is the green hydrogen. And when you just look at what we produce and what we consume about 2 BCM of natural gas. That is massive. And we are actually the largest hydrogen producer, gray hydrogen for the time being, with about 340 kilotons a year. So that says we understand that business, we understand the needs for the transition, but what is actually triggering the development and what are the challenges? So when you look at the pictures at the bottom, is that for us, it's a bit going back in history, because in northern Norway, that is the picture you see on the upper right, we had an ammonia production until 1991, which was based on hydropower, electrolyzer, 150 megawatt, and ammonia production. So why are we now talking about an energy transition and green hydrogen when we did it already? Well, the answer is simple. Natural gas was so much more cost efficient, and basically this process was not very, competitive in a global market. And what we see today is we see a movement that we say we need to reduce CO2 emissions, and that creates also an environment where we have to more or less, where we get as a society a movement towards the change, and we will have basically to follow as industry, and we have to think about how we get the costs under control. So what is concretely our way? We had, as a company, until at 1990, about 5.9 million tons of CO2 emission, gross emission, of which 5.2 went into the air. We have done with DNTO reduction quite a significant step. So today we have actually reduced by 60%, and we have now about 3.3 million ton gross emissions and 1.4 CCS and CCU. We use CO2 to make urea, to bind the nitrogen again, and we also supply liquid CO2 for dry ice industry, for the beverage industry, which comes, of course, later on free in the value chain. But so we could say, as a company, we have reached the Paris climate change targets. Why should we continue? Well, we need to continue because this is what society asks us to do. And as a company, we have to listen to this. So what will be our new steps? We have actually three. For us, the most important step to get to green hydrogen. Green hydrogen at this point of time is for us not cost effective, to be honest, and we need to do steps in between till the industry has matured, till electrolyzers become available at lower cost levels, and that is CCS, carbon capture. That was not our preferred option, to be honest, but this is what we need to do. We actually have 700,000 tons of CO2 available, right away available for liquefaction. We are doing it today at site, but to put it into a temporary or into a storage injection fields, that is what we need to do. And now I'm coming to the first challenges. So we have a concrete project here at hand, which we also want to do within the region with other industry partners, because that gives scale, that gives also economic advantages. But what we are facing today is when you're a front runner in this, you have to pave the way. That means you have simple things like the lack of a bilateral agreement between two states does not allow us to transport CO2 to one injection field close to the Norwegian waters. What is also not helping today is the fact that the discussion about what is the financial gap that you have to bridge and how subsidy schemes can support to bridge that gap, because some of the subsidy schemes force us simply to be very fast and not to look at synergy effects with others. That is the carbon capture part. The way to green hydrogen for us is more linked to working in a cluster. And I think this is the huge opportunity in the future. Because on this scheme, you see a regional hydrogen network which combines industries which previously really did not work together and which did not really, let's say, have a good link to each other. So you have from Zeeland Refinery, which is a typical refinery. You have Dow as an further industry partner coming from plastics. You have us from fertilizer production. But then going across the border, going into Flanders, and combining ArcelorMittal, a steel manufacturer, in this cluster, that is the opportunity. There are currently projects ongoing in evaluation between Arcelor and Dow, where they actually look where are the opportunities, where are waste streams that we have that you can convert and give it back to us. So that is what we will do in the future, and that's really where the opportunity comes up. To be honest, the energy transition is too big for individual companies. And I think that is also the challenge for a lot of companies, because we, as the industry, we are used to handle things ourselves and to look left and right and to see a lot of competition. Now we are forced to work together. And it takes time to get to this point, but I'm sure we do. And just looking into our region, into lovely Zeeland, which is a bit, let's say, the forgotten kid in the Netherlands. We know that it's a vacation province, but we are not seen as a large industry cluster. But the port of Antwerp is only 35 kilometers away. Ghent across the border. So when you start to look bigger, you see huge opportunities to work together. And the good news in our case is that we are not direct competitors to each other. So therefore, let's say, taking, of course, competition laws in our mindset, we have been able to open up to each other. We shared our visions and our roadmaps, and we are looking systematically to where can we extract extra value, where can we work together. We are also, let's say, working together towards the authorities, to make clearly understood this is what we need. There's infrastructure required. That's absolutely clear. And we know laying the pipes into the ground or having electrical connections rebuilt, that has a long trajectory. And we're not asking to bypass the regulations, but to have, let's say, to have everyone aligned so that we can do it as fast as possible. And that will be the catalyst to the development, to be honest. The other point is, this is on, let's say, the infrastructure. This is on working together to get concrete projects for the energy transition in place. Of course, you see here as well 2 offshore wind farms, Borssele 1, 2, and the coming 3 and 4, which will feed our needs for green electricity to use green hydrogen. The concept is very much that we say it makes sense to transport the molecules, and we don't necessarily want to transport the electrons. But that is per region different to be done. What is clear is our demand is higher than just what wind power in the region can do. So we need also to think about the energy mix. Let's say, is it wind power alone? Is it wind power and solar? Is nuclear an option? I'm not saying yes or no, but it is, let's say, carbon or low carbon energy source. And we need, let's say, basically here also a consensus within the industry and of course also with society to move ahead. And we cannot, let's say, as long as we think very, let's say, one-dimensional, we will not get there, because this we need to tackle from different angles. Then, as I said, green hydrogen for the time being when it has for us, let's say, a factor of 2.5 price-wise compared to what we have with grey hydrogen. And when I look at the value chain that we have, the margin is still not there. So basically, if we would have tomorrow the possibility to take in green hydrogen, and we do that to a certain small amount, the economics don't work. And we need to create extra value also with the product. So we see ourselves as a plant nutrition company, not as a fertilizer company, because we are also going as a company far further nowadays in the value chain than what we used to do. So not only raw materials, production, and then fertilizer sales, but also looking whether we can combine our activities with the food sector to create something at the end of the day, like a little logo on food boxes. This is the carbon footprint that you have with this product. If we achieve this on long term, then you create extra value that can be used to get the currently high prices for green hydrogen under control. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, once the projects happen, you will see a maturity of the industry, very similar to what you have seen to wind power. And we will have, at the end of the day, on one hand, lower costs, and on the other hand, higher value. And that is the transition. And then, what is hydrogen the one and only? No. Mm-hmm. Hydrogen is one of the base chemical molecules that can be used for a lot of things. And let's see, hydrogen, I remember that was beginning of 2000, we were looking very deep into hydrogen as fuel for buses, for public transport and for trucks. But when you actually look at it, there are other chemicals, call it methanol, call it ammonia, which have a higher energy content, which can also be of use. And that's where the innovation comes in. That's where let's say, the further development comes in. Because in our case, we understand how to make green ammonia. We have, at the same time, DNTO capabilities because we have a catalyst. So if you combine the two and you apply it to ships, mm-hmm. that is a perfect solution for the issue that currently still, let's say, bunker sea oil is burned on high waters, international waters, on ships. So that would be a real step. There are other opportunities, there are other options, but what you see, of course, is that all the industries are starting to look seriously into this. And we're not talking about light tower projects or demo projects, but we're talking about a change. Mm-hmm. And when you just see how the car industry has moved towards electrical cars over the last 2 to 3 years, I'm convinced that with hydrogen and with other energy carriers, let's say, derived from there, like green ammonia, like green methanol, you will see the same development. And that is basically, what I see in a nutshell, what is going to happen. Right. And I think I really would like to utilize the rest of the time then to answer questions.
To answer questions, yeah. Let's go to the questions. Thank you for elaborating on your story here. Oh, I see that we have already a first question here. What are the major hurdles faced by industry to set up this collaboration? Technical, organizational, or regulatory? Well, interesting question.
The main hurdles is, to begin with, trust.
Trust.
That is, you need to, even with industry partners that are not direct competitors, we're so used to do things on our own, right, and to develop in-house that, let's say, you need to understand, okay, is the other partner a real partner or just a time waster? What are they interested in? Yeah. And that is what we had to develop in Zeeland is we needed really a couple of meetings to open up. Of course, there are regulatory concerns. Let's say the anti-competition or laws. Let's say that's clear that we have to follow that. Yeah. But that is not the biggest one.
And then it's trust in partners too.
Trust in partners, and then the next step is, of course, to come to the collaboration. At the end of the day, right, needs to be based on concrete projects. Right. So you have to get from a high level, and let's say when I remember in the energy transition discussion or Klimaatakkoord discussions in the Netherlands, yeah, there were a lot of discussions 2 years ago where you were just, let's say, checking out, okay, what is the position of the other company and where are the potential combinations? Where are the potential seeds for a collaboration?
Yeah.
That has passed, so the kind of scouting is gone.
Right.
And now we see concrete projects evolving. And with these projects, then you have something where you can really build upon.
Right.
And if you don't get to that level, then it stays a kind of, a collaboration to lobby. But I think that is not really what we want to see on long term.
Do you see a shift in that? Is there progress in that? Is there...
Yes, there are now real concrete projects at hand. That is also what the overheid, the government is actually insisting upon, because this is what makes the change at the end of the day.
Right.
It's not a fancy-dancy presentation of a roadmap. It's not a plan. At the end of the day, it's a concrete project.
Yeah.
And that will also really enhance the collaboration.
Right. Right. So you're optimistic.
I'm very optimistic.
Very optimistic. We have a second question here. Yara has a long experience with green hydrogen. What happened to the electrolyzer in Glomfjord? Yeah. So because you did it already, but then you stopped, right?
We stopped, unfortunately, and when you look at it, 150 megawatt electrolyzer, you can argue, of course, whether the efficiency was as good as it is today, or whether you can do it with less cells. But this is what you would call today a kind of world scale unit. Unfortunately, at that time, when you look into the 90s, gas ruled. So does it today. And basically, we are, let's say, fertilizer is to a certain degree a commodity, globally traded.
Yeah.
That means there was no way that with green ammonia, you could get actually a margin anywhere.
Right.
And without that margin, it was simply not competitive.
Right, right.
And we still have some colleagues in the company that remembers that time, and we still have the old design booklets, probably with 3-4 centimeters of dust above.
Yeah.
But it's amazing when you look at industry, what has been done in the past. So it's not all
new technology,
but it's very often that the technology has to be applied at the right time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting how these things evolve. Yeah. Third question: what gives you confidence that the energy transition will effectively lead to innovation?
I could, let's say, of course, I base myself on history.
Right.
And as I said, we made the transition. We started off in 1929 in Sluiskil, based on coke gas. That was the innovation at that time.
Right.
And the entire chemistry evolved out of that. That went till the beginning of the 60s, when gas became available. And again, this changed also our industry and how we handle. So I think industry is always looking for the additional added value.
Yeah.
That means if we can bridge the gap towards, let's say, financially acceptable green hydrogen price, then automatically you will see the benefits. And let's see, we have been struggling as it is, I have to be honest, not self-explanatory any longer to produce fertilizers in Western Europe, because our competition sits in the Arab Gulf, in North Africa, where the gas prices are cheaper.
Right.
So we always needed to do something more to stay competitive.
Right.
That was reliability of the plants, that was efficiency of the plants.
Yeah.
And what I would add now, that's the collaboration. That's the collaboration. If what I'm, let's say, not dreaming of, but what I see as the future, the clustering of industry, the exploitation of synergies that you have, that will give additional value, and I'm sure this will create then the innovation.
And
because you look from different angles into the same matter.
Right. Right. Yeah. Wow, I get a lot of energy from you when you say it.
It's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I hear this. We have the fourth question coming up. How do you view the possible impact of European plans for carbon border tax adjustment mechanism? Can you catch me up for this?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's a difficult topic, because it applies very much to us because just to give it a bit of a background, the site that you have seen the picture of, we make about 5 million tons of product,
Right.
and more than 50% of that one does not end up in the European Union these
Okay.
days.
Yeah.
So when you have common border tax adjustments, this is, let's say, the mechanism will never be 100% fair. We know that because we will not be protected for exports. But for imports to get the time to build, let's say, to make the transition work,
Right.
that is also a period where your profitability is going to be lower and where you have, let's say, there is a price difference between green hydrogen and gray hydrogen. And we are not in a position at this point of time to pass that over to end consumers. So basically, it eats the profit.
Right.
And at the same time, we need good subsidy schemes, not Staatssteun, to actually be able, let's say, to make that transition happen. So for that period, you surely need mechanisms that at least stays within the European Union is traded fairly, because else, this is unfortunate. We have very frequently global markets, but you do not see yet on global scale that the energy transition happens with the same pace.
Right.
So we need to make sure that the ones that stay on gray hydrogen don't take that as an opportunity to get us into bankruptcy at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael Sluik, for sharing your story and answering these questions.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Thanks.
So, we're going to the next parallel sessions, which are parallel sessions 3 and 4. So previously with 1 and 2, we had some technical difficulties. Therefore, we will share the URLs for parallel session 3 and 4 in the chat. So keep an eye on the chat. Don't scroll down. That was what we did previously, but now you can find the URLs in the chat. You have the ability to choose between room number 3, technology development, or room number 4, scientific developments. So in room number 3, we have 2 experts from the equipment industry who will share their technology developments and future plans regarding ECCM technology. Or you can go to room number 4, where 2 scientific experts will share the latest state-of-the-art in ECCM research and how it might disrupt the energy sector and industry. So we will see each other back here at approximately 4:30, I think, 4:30. Enjoy. So welcome back. We hope that you enjoyed parallel session 3 and 4. So we have an open-ended question for you. We're very curious about your thoughts here. You can scroll down for the question and answer it. If the Netherlands were to appoint a national ambassador and direct advisor for to the cabinet for the hydrogen economy, who should it be? We're very curious, and please suggest us with a name. So to rephrase the question again, if the Netherlands were to appoint a national ambassador and direct advisor to the cabinet for the hydrogen economy, who should it be? Yeah, Richard, we're very curious, right?
We are very curious.
What the names will be. What will we do with the with the answers that we collect? What will happen with?
Have to wait a little bit until some suggestions come in.
Yeah, we will give people a little bit of time to think of a name. So when these answers are collected, what will we do with these names?
There will be input, I think, for some people who are going
Very
to be
eager.
maybe contacted. This is what I expected. I'm not available.
Oh, Richard, of course, yeah. You're not available.
Not yet. No,
Or Royal Highness King Willem-Alexander, Pauline Herder, yeah. Yeah, and I also like the of course bit. Me, someone says me, but we're not sure who me is. Richard, the hydrogen economy is too narrow. Ah, okay, yeah. Nijpels, Thijs de Groot. Who else do we have? Oh, Chief Technology Officer, Mr.
Mrs.
Mrs. Ramirez. Yeah, oh yeah, Andrea Ramirez, who we just say in the keynote. Ad van Wijk, I see. Let me see if we have some new ones popping up. Adwin Martens, Waterstofnet. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, thank you. Oh, I see a lot of other names also pop in. Yeah, so thank you very much. So we will take a close look into those names, right? Okay, so I'm here again with ECCM chair, and we are heading towards the very last part of this conference. So we first have a quick recap of the 4 parallel sessions of today. Then Richard has some last announcements to make that you don't want to miss. And last but not least, we have the ability to have remote drinks, as we call it, to network and to chat with fellow participants and with speakers. So we will start with a quick recap of today first. And I will ask the moderators of the parallel sessions about their take-home messages. But before I'm going to ask the moderators of their take-home messages from the 4 parallel sessions, there is someone else to address to this question. Someone who's very important, and that person is you. So we would love to know from you, we're very curious to learn from you, what was the biggest take-home message for you? So what was your main takeaway of today's event? And please let us know in the chat as well. We're going to craft a word cloud from your answers here. And I suggest that we go already to the first moderator, and then we will come back to the answers of the takeaway. So you will have some time to think about your takeaway of today, and then we will start with the first moderator of parallel session number 1, which was Room 1, International Infrastructure. So I would like to invite on this virtual stage moderator Ronald Wolf. Moderator. Ronald, I see you. Yes, there you are. Hi. Ronald, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh,
sure.
great.
I
Oh,
want to give,
perfect. So, can you take us your takeaway from international infrastructure in Room 1?
I think on our side it was a very interesting discussion. It was about our national infrastructure, and we have 2 speakers, Jörg Gigler and Maarten Abbenhaus. Jörg is very much active in the hydrogen creation of a national vision.
Right.
And Maarten is the COO of TenneT and was the vision of TenneT how to build the national electrical infrastructure. And obviously, we all know that they somehow need to come together to make available to us the future national infrastructure on energy as a total. So starting with the discussion around the hydrogen infrastructure, Jörg shared a story about how to build it, first starting with an industrial set of applications in the sense that hydrogen first market would be mainly on industrial, and then later building it out into the more domestic regime, and indicated the kind of difficulties we would have to face, bringing it in the public domain, but also making sure that we would also have the available assets where it comes to importing of hydrogen, where there would not be enough to cover our own use nationally. Connecting to it, there was a story from Maarten telling about the strong growth of TenneT. Not many years ago, only 800 people, now already above 5,000 people, dealing with an extreme growth of the national grids and preparing for scale. And I think that was the key word in both grid activities.
Scale. Yeah. Oh, we have a glitch in the audio I see here. But yeah, so scale was the keyword from both of the speakers who were moderated by Ronald Wolf in the first room, international infrastructure. So we have some technical difficulties with those with those two parallel sessions, but we will make sure that their presentations will be on the website later on. So we will go to room number 2, industrial integration, and Geert Laagland was the moderator here. Welcome, Geert. Come on in, and I'm very curious about your takeaway from room 2, industrial integration.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks. Yeah, we had two speakers. The first one was Michael Kool from RWE. He is commercial managing director of the gas storages in the Netherlands and Germany.
Yeah.
And he highlighted the storage of hydrogen and what it could mean, and also how to develop this over time. I'm trying to get this out. Is it better now?
Yeah, we can see and hear you clearly.
Okay. So storage is an important part of the infrastructure for hydrogen, because the production of hydrogen and the consumption of hydrogen will not be synchronized. So we need an intermediate storage. And Michael explained in detail how that could work out, how that could be developed, what can be used, salt caverns, for example. So that's a good outlook for the future. I still hear an echo.
Well, we hear you loud and clear, Geert. Thank you very much for sharing this this highlight.
Okay, and the other speaker was Dennis Savia from GI Dynamics.
Yeah.
And they are developing a project in Amsterdam to produce methanol for gasification of non-recyclable waste. And they also want to integrate hydrogen to boost the methanol production, because if you gasify this waste, then you have more carbon than hydrogen if you look at the mass balance. So if you add green hydrogen to this process, you can boost the yield of this methanol plant quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's also very interesting in the harbor area of Amsterdam, where also hydrogen infrastructure is being considered. So also, the main intention of this parallel session was to focus on implementation and making steps forward. And I think those two examples were very nice to illustrate this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing this and giving us this short resume about your parallel session number 2. Then we go to parallel session number 3, room 3, technology development. So I'd like to invite on this virtual stage with me moderator Ton Pijnenburg. Let's see if we can. Yes, there we are. Yes, Ton, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm there. So first lecture we had by Thomas Thiemann from Siemens. And that was about, am I audible?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That was about, let's say, the challenges that are needed to let's say, move the hydrogen production to green. So looking at the amount of renewable energy that's needed for that, he made a very nice projection on what is needed in the future. Talked about how to move from lowest cost regions to decarbonization command centers. Power to fuel plants as a missing link, and we also discussed, or he also rather discussed, some challenges. There was questions about how to deal with the, let's say, the intermittency of the hydrolyzers using PEM technology, and how to address that scarcity of the key ingredient of iridium in those electrolyzers. So that was an interesting talk with the follow-up questions. Interestingly enough, the other speaker, Ivo Wessels, currently with VDL, manages a former Siemens facility. So we had a Siemens missing connecting link in our stories. And Ivo explained from his perspective and his, let's say, initiatives to turn that facility, which is making gas turbines at the moment, into a facility that will make equipment for renewable energy, and described a plan for an integrated plant for experimentation and making hydrogen, storing it, and also using it in an example of industrial settings. So that was also, he was asked about what type of technology that would be used for the electrolyzers, and that, let's say, that's still starting with traditional and moving to more competitive technologies, but no firm selections at the moment, let's say.
Yeah, so broad range of topics and a very lively session. It sounds like. Yeah, thank you, Tom Pijnenburg, for sharing your resume here. Or recap, I must say. So then from room 4, scientific developments, I would like to invite on this virtual stage moderator Guido Mul.
It's Mark Koper.
I'm sorry? Richard says, no, that's Mark Koper. So, hi. Hi, Mark Koper. You were the moderators together with Guido Mul, right?
Together with Guido,
yeah,
yes.
together.
So we had Paul Canis and Matthias Wesseling from Aachen University discussed some of the fundamental research needs that we have to bring ECCM forward. One thing that they both agreed on is what is very important is the education of future chemists and chemical engineers. And that there's going to be new topics that are going to be more important than some of the older topics that we teach in our current curriculum. One example that Matthias gave was the transition from, the old-fashioned thermodynamics to better understanding of, for instance, electrolytes. And that's going to be very important. The other thing is the idea of new reactor geometries, new reactor concepts, especially for electrochemical reactors, maybe the electrification of product separation. Difficult reactions like nitrogen activation, CO2 reduction. Another thing that is very important is stability and durability of these processes. And a very important fundamental research need there would be to be able to in situ look at electrodes as they do their job and how they develop over time. These would be, I think, the most important things that we discussed.
Yeah, clear. Thank you for sharing, Mark Koper. So that was room number 4, scientific development. So we had a short recap of all the 4 parallel sessions, but we're also very curious about your recap. So what was your main takeaway of today's event? Let's see if we can, here we say, skill up and hurry up. Good luck next generation. Oof, that's a tough one. Dutch industry is eager to collaborate. What are your thoughts, Richard?
Yeah, I think this clearly reflects indeed where we are. And, we have to hurry up with scaling up also and with deploying of all the technologies. Yeah. And indeed, there's a lot of opportunities for next generation. And Dutch, this is basically, that's I think, the strength of ECCM. It's along all the TRL levels. So we are working public-privately with the government to actually get this going.
To get this going, exactly.
And we need more engineers, of course. We need more, let's say, feeding of the pipeline of new technologies, which eventually, after maybe 2030, 2035, is gonna actually fulfill that promise of direct electrochemistry.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Like we've talked before. So you have some announcements to make as well.
Yes, because we are now nearing the end of the ECCM conference. I think we can look back to a very, very successful, but I have at the end, as always, a couple of announcements. Now, the first one is an announcement that following up on the call to action and let's say the collaboration between Germany and the Netherlands, we actually have the opportunity now to even discuss this with our king and queen on the state visit they bring to Berlin. And Matthias Wesseling and me, we will have, let's say, a discussion, but also all kind of, let's say, CEOs and CTOs from big companies from the Netherlands and Germany will have actually, let's say, interaction with the king and the queen. Mm-hmm. So that's on the 6th of July. And following that, in the autumn, we hope, we will open up this call, which was already announced, which has let's say a volume of about 10 million euros. Yeah. Yeah. If we can go to the next slide, that's me who has to do this. I think I have to go back, and that's of course the announcement of the ECCM, the second ECCM graduate school. Unfortunately, it's usually in conjunction with the conference. We had to now actually postpone it 2 times. But this has been a very success. The first one was very successful. And the second one will be organized now on the 1st to the 3rd of November this year. Be sure to apply quickly, because this school will now also, let's say, include people from HBO. Mm-hmm. And so there are only 50 places, and it's very popular. So make sure you actually subscribe very quickly to go there. Then in November, Actually, it was the idea to also do this in conjunction with the conference, to do the day before an ECCM research day. It's about, let's say, all the research which is ongoing in the various programs and projects which are connected to ECCM, but it's open for all. It's basically a forum where PhD students, but also, let's say, students from HBO, and maybe also researchers out of industry who have actually something to contribute, can come together on this ECCM Research Day. It will be organized on the 18th of November, somewhere in the middle of the country, so that we can all go there very easily. And as I said, it's an event for scientists and from academia and industry involved in the National Research Program. And then finally, we actually announced already the 5th ECCM conference, hopefully live, that we can all see each other again and network. And it's now projected to be on the 24th of June in 2022, and probably in The Hague, because we are very popular, and so we have to look for very big sites at the moment. And The Hague is one where you can get this.
Yeah, so fingers crossed that we can see each other in person again. Yeah, thank you, Richard. Yeah. So we're moving now towards the very last, but definitely not least part of the conference. We have the ability to go and network, to have, as we call it, a remote drink with one another. So you get acquainted with new people, you can talk with one of the speakers. In order to do this, you can click on networking, which can be found at the top, at the orange navigation bar on the top of your screen. So go and search for networking. When you enter the networking area, you can enter a group and a conversation topic of your choice simply by clicking on Join Group. So, that being said, we hope that you have enjoyed today's conference. We hope that you gained new insights, inspiration, knowledge about the latest developments in the field. We want to thank you for your active attention and your participation. We hope to see you, of course, at the remote drinks area, and we wish you a very pleasant afternoon.